Hello, my name is Victoria Roten, and this is my podcast. Well, actually, Michael's and my podcast. And the topic we've been talking about is how important it is to be deeply connected with ourselves and be able to share that connection with other people. And that if we don't have that connection inside and also with other people, we tend to have an addiction of some type, because it is so very, very painful to feel alone and unloved, and to believe that if people really understood who you were, they wouldn't want anything to do with you. So we're going to talk more about that today, and also I was going to share a little bit about a class I took. I took a 20-hour class with the Gottmans, who are, the gurus of couples counseling. And I think I haven't really mentioned that most of the people I see actually are couples. And so I'm constantly working with people to learn how to communicate on a deeper level. I think that's really the marriage killer out there, is lack of connection. And oftentimes there is some kind of addictive process going on in a marriage too, where the couple, instead of supporting each other and really deeply connecting with each other, are instead having several drinks every night, or getting high, or spending money they don't have, on and on and on. And that even though they may not realize it, they don't believe if they were really truly known, they would be loved. And so the point of the class was sharing things that have been traumatic in your past. So they worked with a lot of veterans and children, of course now they're adults, that have had severe trauma. And they work with the couple to try to get the partners to be able to really share that deep wounding and have their husband or wife really receive that and understand that and show empathy. And sometimes for the first time, somebody in the couple actually feels like they're not just seen for their, happy-go-lucky self, but that they are really fully understood and loved for all of who they are. And that can be a really difficult process, because there are people that have suffered really severe trauma. I mentioned vets, but also so many people grew up in families that weren't safe, or even just had a bad experience with a neighbor or something like that. So yeah, it's a very, very difficult thing to do, but the results are kind of magical sometimes, where, this finally being seen, finally being known, makes all the difference in their ability to connect.
Well, I know for me, in my previous relationship, I was married to another soldier. And when I say another soldier, I'm also a veteran. And we did not know each other. And a lot of the problems that we had, it was because we were essentially strangers that lived together and had children. And I think if I had known her story from the beginning, I would have probably been more empathetic. I think it would have made us closer and stronger. But at the same time,
Excuse me.
we both came from a background of shame, kind of like the shaming of having cell phones on when we're doing a podcast.
But if it's worth doing shitty.
So we're going to have these little hiccups, but
There we go.
in the movie theater, we would have asked you all to put your phones on cinema mode, but since you're watching from your home, it's not going to be a big deal. But as I was saying, I guess firsthand experience, there was substance abuse, which I didn't understand. There was none of that in my home. There was abuse, but it wasn't substance abuse. I was the substance of the abuse growing up. But Victoria and I, during our time together, we have shared, some of the deepest and some of the more painful events of our lives together. And I think what the takeaway with that is that we have an understanding as to why the other one reacts the way that they do in certain situations. And for me, I'm less apt to take something personal because I have information that says that reaction wasn't about me. And plus it gives us that space to sit down and have dialogue.
Which brings us to the conversation we were going to have today. Michael and I have been together, we're closing in on a year and a half, maybe a little bit more, but not a super long time. And it's definitely been the deepest and most loving relationship I've ever had with anyone. I didn't know it was possible, so I'm very grateful for that. But there has just been something bothering me over the last couple of weeks, memories from my past that have been coming up. And I don't know why it's been there, but I keep thinking, oh, I should tell Michael this, or I should share this. Nah, it's not that important. It happened a super long time ago, which is what people tend to think. You know, that's whole story. I've heard it a million times. It's in the past. Why do I need to talk about it? And I'm like, you know, when I'm working with clients, I'm always like, yeah, the things that we don't share and process affect everything we do. Mm-hmm. We don't get to put those in the past. We have to go through a process of actually having our feelings and understanding what happened so that we can know, like if we're angry, who we're really angry at, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of people are angry at things I think that they have no idea. You know, they're directing it at somebody in traffic or one of their kids, but it has nothing to do with what they're actually upset about. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I was just having a really hard time today, and I was sitting at the table and I'm still thinking about this stuff that happened to me back in my late teens and early 20s, and for whatever reason I just haven't told Michael about it, and I just felt really shut down, and I felt kind of like a little bit crazy, and I'm like, what is bothering me? Like, is this actually what's bothering me? I could not figure it out. And so then at some point I just started having sort of some feelings of like self-hatred. Mm-hmm. And I know that sounds like a strong word, but it really was that kind of feeling. And again, I'm just sitting here going, everything in my life is working. I have a great job. I have a great partner. We do fun things. Why is this coming up for me? And of course, the Gottman stuff is swirling around, but there's also like, this stuff that is bothering me isn't that bad, right? Like, so I'm minimizing it and dismissing it. And finally, I got to the point where I was like really starting to cry and definitely not wanting to be in my body and still not really having the words for what was bothering me. Like, what is this? Why am I getting more and more and more upset? And sort of the things I was saying is like, you know, I should there's a guy, I can't think of his name right now, a very famous psychologist that used to call that masturbation, right? If you should yourself, don't should yourself.
I've not heard that before.
Masturbation, don't should yourself, right? And so anyway, I'm saying to myself, I should be blah, 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 like further along in my career, more capable, you know, just a whole bunch of truly BS, but it felt so true, felt so real. This feeling of like, I have never been good enough and I am never going to get there. And what did you notice when I was starting to go through that?
There was a lot of self-hatred. Yeah, you were beating up on yourself pretty hard. Mm-hmm. I noticed you regressing in years back to a much, much younger you for periods of time, someone I didn't recognize. Mm-hmm. And it was both hurtful and a little frightening to watch someone who's normally so confident and strong lose their steps and seemingly out of control. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned several times wanting to harm yourself, which was alarming to me. We both have that in our backgrounds, and it's a path that once you start on it, it's really hard to get off of it because it's gratifying in a lot of ways to be able to control what you feel on the outside. You get that sense of management. And then, again, another piece of shame. So for me, I guess it leveled me in the sense that, well, I have definitely felt that way, I can relate. But I just could not understand at the moment why it all boiled to the surface. And we spent a big part of our morning talking about it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I want to emphasize, generally, I'm a pretty well-regulated person. You know, in my past, I've talked about my addiction and all that I struggled with in my late teens and my early 20s, but this is not my norm.
No.
I would say basically I am insecure, but I, have worked on it for years. But the feeling was coming up for me, and as Michael pointed out, it was really weird. I just kind of wanted to maybe hit my head against the wall. I know that sounds so drastic. I'm worried people are gonna run out of the room, but it was really intense, and I didn't harm myself, but I finally was like, okay, I'm just gonna share with Michael some of the things that I have not wanted to talk to him about. And mostly, it had to do with choices I made in my 20s, or actually it was much earlier than that, like 17, 18, 19, 20, where I, basically, I was extremely promiscuous, and it wasn't because I cared about the men I was sleeping with. I was really trying to get attention and make up for my growing up years of feeling like my dad hated me, and that he thought I was ugly, he thought I wasn't smart. Every word that came out of his mouth was like a criticism towards me, and so I was just looking for male attention anywhere I could get it. And this is a lot of women's stories. I say the best preventative for being harmed out in the world, sexually assaulted or coming to harm, is knowing that you are loved and that there are people there to support you. And if you don't know that, you're gonna, as that cliche saying is, looking for love in all the wrong places. I was out there doing that, but basically having sex. And if anyone did actually love me, it scared me so much that I would literally run away. Like I would just drop people at the, just cut them off if I started feeling like they were getting too close, because I think I had so much unexplored feelings and pain. And if you start to let yourself get close to somebody, it was just way too scary. I didn't know what it was that was bothering me. I just knew I can't do this. Like literally it was like a panic feeling, and I would run away. And it just made me so sad to think about all those years as a young girl trying so hard to be good enough, trying so hard to be loved, and doing it in such a dangerous and harmful way. And that went on for a long time. So I've talked about my eating disorder and the things that I did, like smoking and drinking too much, but I haven't really fully shared the extent of the self-harming I did with sex and trying to be liked. And so, I finally got it out, and the whole time I was trying to share it, like this other part of me is like, I just want to hit my head against the wall. Like Michael said, I want the pain. My head actually was hurting. I want the pain to be here instead of this overwhelming sensation that I was having I didn't know what it was about. But it was amazing, like once I finally told you about some of those incidences where I let myself be used, and also, I think I was used inappropriately by men, all of a sudden that pain in my head went away, and had no desire whatsoever to harm myself. So I know, I mean, I just wanted to share this as an example of how important having that deep connection with somebody is, because you can go from like just feeling just in a position of, I don't know what to do with all this pain, to really being able to release it. And the rest of my day has been great. Went and got my hair cut, and we're sitting here now and talking about going on a bike ride tomorrow. So it was really tough, but I'm so thankful that you were as kind as you were. You just sat there and listened to me and held me and told me you love me. And at the end of it, I said, do you still love me? And I really felt scared about that he wouldn't, once he knew all this, he wouldn't love me anymore. And I think you said you were a little bit offended by that because of your own insecurity, and not really realizing, this isn't about you. It's like, this is the stuff that I have believed makes me unlovable or made me unlovable. And I, in no way questioning your love for me. It's just that we have things when we have that much trauma that I decided that I could not be lovable given the things that happened. And it's just, I see people all the time. I see clients, I've worked with couples, and I have no problem understanding what happened to them and how it affected them and why they feel the way they feel. But it was so much harder to look inside myself. That's the reason we need outside help, is you need someone standing outside you, looking at you with love and compassion, and really trying to deeply understand why you did the things you did, and show you that you are a lovable and beautiful person despite the painful things that happened.
Well, like I said, it was a huge learning for me as well. I think a lot of us that have experienced trauma, especially those who have trauma surrounding abandonment, I think where my offense and my fear was when she asked me the question if I still loved her was, did you tell me this because you wanted me to think less of you so that I would leave, some type of self-fulfilling prophecy? And I was afraid. And I guess that should be a conversation we have at another time, but I do notice that even in work relationships, when someone is talking about moving to another team, not to take that personal. Maybe they have other aspirations, and it's been a challenge. I mean, my journey is far from over, so I'm learning about myself all the time. But back to what we were discussing, now that you had that deep emotional clearing, did you feel that, other than feeling better, you said your head stopped hurting, was it a relief not to be carrying that by yourself anymore after all of these years?
Absolutely. I felt incredibly relieved, and your love and acceptance was a big part of that. Like I just feel more compassion for myself now after sharing that story and seeing the compassion in your eyes, right?
It was a bonding moment. I felt humbled that you chose to share, such heavy things with me. And so it does go to speak to the trust we've built over the past, year and a half or so of learning about each other. So I know that a lot of couple friends that I've had the chance to know in my lifetime, I think I knew more about them individually than they knew about each other as a couple. And I always wondered, why that was. And I ended up being the confessor to a lot of people. But the person that most needed to hear some of these things was their partners. So the person that you have chosen and the person that has chosen you, and you've mutually chosen to spend your life together with, they need to know you. I mean, not everything you've ever done, not the cookie you stole when your aunt wasn't looking, that's of no consequence. But if it's something that's going to dictate your behavior as the years go by, it's important that they have an understanding, because it leads to misunderstanding, if they don't know.
I agree, and it is, if you come from a family where people share openly and talk about their happiness as well as the things that have happened or the difficulties in their day-to-day life, it isn't really even that hard, right?
No.
You're comfortable with talking about things like being lonely or anxious or harm that's been done. But if you came from a family where you were actually abused for having feelings, or sent off to your room to get your act together when you were sad, because no one was comfortable with someone being sad or lonely, or just struggling. In fact, they're activated by that. I remember one client telling me that when she was bullied, her father would get so angry at her for not standing up for herself instead of trying to help her and support her. He was just totally triggered by her emotion. And so she knew the last person that she wanted to talk to was her father, because he would get mad because it triggered his unfinished business around being bullied and being abused.
Well, I do think that there is generational trauma. You and I have had this conversation. It was kind of a myth to me until you explained to me that, some of the same insecurities that my mother and father may have had based on their upbringing could have been or have been passed on to me. There are certain things I react to that I really shouldn't have an opinion on, but knowing the lives of other family members, especially my parents, as a parent myself, I see what I pass on to my children. Unfortunately, my daughter is very anxious. She has a serious fear of abandonment, even though she was raised from birth through adulthood with two parents. But it's always been important for her to have someone right there all the time. And for me, not having that, I guess I pass it on to her, because, she was never alone. She was never without family. So that's something I passed on to her. And I talked to her about it. I've not actually asked her if I could tell the world this, but her first day of school was kindergarten. And I remember she was in this orange outfit that she had picked out with flowers, and she had an orange bow in her hair. And she was all excited about her first day of school. So we walked down to the corner. She gets on the bus, and she didn't even look back. She was just gone. She was just ready for it. So 4 hours later, this is when kindergarten was half day, the bus pulls up, and she comes off of the bus, and she's just crying. She's crying. I'm like, Nikki, sweetie, what's going on? And she was like, Daddy, I don't have any friends. So her first 4 hours into academia, she wanted instant love and acceptance from everybody she met, and she didn't get it that first day, but she's something she had her whole life. Everyone that met her was like, oh, Nikki, you're so beautiful, let's play, or whatever. And I may have passed that on to her, because I did not have a whole lot of friends until I learned that I was not my family, and I was an individual. And as soon as I started identifying as just Michael, my world got a little easier. And I had that conversation with her. Oops, sorry. We have to remember to silence our devices. So, but anyway, I had the conversation with her, And as time went on, I mean, she had more friends than she can keep up with. I remember the first Valentine's Day when she was in school, she brought back this box. You know, remember those little Valentine's Day cards you buy from the drugstore that you give out to your classmates? I mean, she was inundated with those. And she was like, I have so many friends. And she was just so happy. So I wish that I had told her more about my childhood. I think it would have helped her avoid so many things. But she is, you know, her own person. She is doing her own thing and making her own choices. So, but that's just a small example. I guess some of those conversations should have been had with the adults in my life, like, you know, I have with Victoria. But don't keep yourself a secret from the people that you love.
And, you know, the last thing I think I want to say about this is find those people that are safe. And it's so hard when you don't trust anyone. Like I said, for me, if someone showed me love or care, I would run away. I would approach the people that were scary and dangerous because that was more familiar to me. And so it is such a change in your thinking. I mean, I guess I was talking yesterday about you have to go towards the unfamiliar because familiar isn't going to get what you want. And I always say, whatever family you come from, that family has a language or its own unique accent. And if that accent is the accent of addiction or trauma or neglect, you're going to see that, you know, violence, you're going to see that and recognize it and go, oh, that person talks my language, and this time I'm going to get them to love me and fix all of that pain and trauma that was inflicted on me. And it never works.
Sometimes we need to go for the accent that we don't recognize.
Exactly.
Because the one that we've been hearing our whole life has been harming us.
Yep.
So.
And that's really tricky. I can't tell you how many people have told me, yeah, I grew up in an alcoholic room, an alcoholic family, and I will find the one alcoholic in the room, and that is the person I'm immediately drawn to, and I don't even know anything about them. And I just feel relaxed and comfortable. And, you know, again, I've had people tell me I married 3 alcoholics, not 1, not 2, 3 alcoholics, because that experience feels so familiar, and you know how to do it, and you know your role, and you're practiced at it, and it also is a recipe for more misery.